They say the truth always comes out. But what they don't tell you is how lonely it feels carrying that truth alone, watching everyone believe the lie instead. Welcome to the last lesson. I'm so glad you're here. If this is your first time, please subscribe. I share real stories about heartbreak, healing, and hope every week. I met him on a Saturday night in October. I remember because the air had that sharp autumn chill, and I'd wrapped myself in an oversized cardigan that made me feel safe and small at the same time. My friend Maya was throwing one of her chaotic house parties, the kind where people spilled into every room, and the music was too loud and you had to shout to be heard. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I'd been studying for midterms all week, exhausted and socially drained, but Maya had begged me. "You never come out anymore," she'd said. "Just for an hour. I promise it'll be fun." So I went, and that's where I saw him. His name was Julian. He was leaning against the kitchen counter, talking to a group of guys I vaguely recognized from campus. But he wasn't like them, loud, performative, trying too hard. He was quieter, observant. When he laughed, it seemed genuine, not forced. There was something about the way he held himself that felt steady. Our eyes met across the room, and he smiled. Not a smirk, not a half attempt. A real smile that reached his eyes. I smiled back, probably too quickly, and looked away, feeling my cheeks warm. I wasn't used to attention like that. I'd always been the friend guys talked to about other girls, never the girl they actually noticed. But Julian noticed. 10 minutes later, he was standing next to me near the snack table, pretending to be very interested in the bowl of stale chips. "You don't really want those, do you?" he said, grinning. I laughed. "Definitely not." "Good. Neither do I want to grab actual food. There's a taco place down the street that's open late." I hesitated. I didn't know him, but something about him felt safe. So I said yes. That night, we sat in a booth at a tiny taco shop with peeling vinyl seats and fluorescent lights that buzzed too loud. We talked for 3 hours, about everything and nothing. About our majors, he was studying business, I was in communications. About our families, he was the oldest of 3, I was an only child. About music, movies, the meaning of life, whether pineapple belonged on pizza. He listened when I talked, really listened. Not the way people do when they're just waiting for their turn to speak. He asked follow-up questions. He remembered details. When I mentioned I loved old bookstores, he said, "There's this amazing one about 20 minutes from campus. We should go sometime." Sometime. That word felt like a promise. By the time he walked me back to my apartment, the sky was starting to lighten. We stood outside my door, and I didn't want the night to end. "Can I see you again?" he asked. I nodded, trying not to seem too eager. "I'd like that." He texted me before I even got inside. "Tonight was really great. Let's do it again soon." I stared at my phone, smiling like an idiot. The next few weeks were a blur of late-night texts, coffee dates between classes, and long drives with no destination. Julian had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world. When I talked, he put his phone away. When I was stressed about school, he'd show up with my favorite iced coffee and a playlist he'd made just for me. He remembered everything. The name of my childhood dog, my favorite scent of candle, the fact that I hated surprises but loved thoughtful gestures. "You pay attention," I told him once, amazed. He shrugged, smiling. "Only to things that matter." My friends loved him. Maya said he was a total catch. My roommate Bree said she'd never seen me this happy. Even my mom, who was notoriously skeptical of anyone I dated, softened after talking to him on FaceTime. "He seems like a good guy," she'd said. "Just be careful, okay?" I thought she was being overprotective. Looking back, maybe she saw something I didn't. 8 months in, we moved in together. It felt natural. We were already spending every night together anyway, and my lease was ending. Julian suggested it casually one evening while we were watching a movie on his couch. "What if you just stayed?" he said. "Like, officially. Move in." I remember feeling this rush of warmth. This was it. This was what it felt like to build a future with someone. "Are you sure?" I asked. I've never been more sure of anything. So I moved in. At first, it was everything I dreamed of. Waking up next to him, making breakfast together on lazy Sundays, falling asleep to the sound of his breathing. It felt like home. But slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice, things started to shift. It started with little things. He'd ask where I was going when I left the apartment, who I was with, what time I'd be back. At first, I thought it was sweet. He cared. He wanted to know about my day. But then it became more frequent. Why didn't you text me back? He'd ask if I didn't respond within 20 minutes. Who's that guy commenting on your Instagram? He'd say, scrolling through my phone while I was in the shower. You're wearing that? He'd comment when I put on something I felt good in. I started second-guessing myself. Was I being inconsiderate by not texting back faster? Was I dressing inappropriately? Was I giving other guys the wrong idea without realizing it? I made excuses for him. He'd had bad relationships before. He was just protective. He loved me and didn't want to lose me. Love looks different for everyone, I told myself. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, something felt wrong. I remember one night in particular. I'd gone out for dinner with Maya and a few girlfriends. Nothing crazy, just catching up, laughing over pasta and cheap wine. I told Julian where I was going. I texted him updates throughout the night. But when I got home, he was sitting on the couch in the dark, arms crossed. You said you'd be home by 10, he said quietly. It's 10:15, I said, confused. We just lost track of time. You could have texted. I did text. Multiple times. He stared at me, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Something cold. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. He sighed, rubbing his face. I'm sorry. I missed you. I worry when you're out. He pulled me into a hug, and I let myself relax into him. But that night, lying next to him in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling. That maybe the person I'd fallen in love with wasn't who I thought he was. That maybe the red flags I'd been ignoring were about to become impossible to miss. The thing about red flags is that they don't announce themselves. They don't wave dramatically in your face screaming, "Hey, run." Instead, they blend into the background of your daily life, disguised as concern, as love, as protection. And by the time you finally see them for what they are, you've already normalized 100 small violations of your peace. It took me 3 more months to realize I was suffocating. The morning I decided to end it, the sun was streaming through our bedroom window in that gentle, golden way that usually made me feel grateful. But that morning, all I felt was trapped. Julian was still asleep beside me, his arm draped across my waist possessively even in unconsciousness. I stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the paint, and thought about how I'd become a stranger to myself. I didn't recognize the girl who asked permission to see her friends anymore. I didn't recognize the girl who changed outfits 3 times before leaving the house, trying to find something that wouldn't trigger a comment. I didn't recognize the girl who'd stopped posting on social media altogether, because it was easier than dealing with the interrogation about who liked what and why. That girl wasn't me. But somehow, over the past year, I'd become her. The night before had been the final straw. I'd gotten a text from an old friend from high school, Marcus. We'd been close once, purely platonic, the kind of friendship where you could talk about anything without it ever being weird. He was in town for the weekend and wanted to grab coffee and catch up. I'd shown Julian the text immediately. I'd learned to do that, to be transparent about everything, hoping it would ease his anxiety. Marcus. Julian had said, his jaw tightening. The guy who had a crush on you junior year? That was 7 years ago, I'd said carefully. And it was never serious. We're just friends. Just friends, he'd repeated, like the words tasted bitter. Right. Julian, come on. It's just coffee. In public. During the day. He'd gone quiet then, which was somehow worse than anger. He'd turned away from me, shoulders tense, and I'd felt that familiar knot forming in my stomach. That feeling of having done something wrong even though I knew I hadn't. Fine, he'd said eventually, not looking at me. Go. But the word hung in the air like a trap. I'd canceled on Marcus, sent some excuse about being busy, and I'd hated myself for it. That night, lying in bed next to Julian, I'd realized something that made my chest tighten with panic. I was becoming smaller and smaller, shrinking myself to fit into the shape he wanted me to be. And I was so tired of disappearing. So that morning, while he slept, I made my decision. I waited until he woke up, made coffee the way he liked it, sat down across from him at our tiny kitchen table that had once felt cozy and now felt suffocating. We need to talk, I said. He looked up from his phone, and I saw it immediately, that flicker of panic in his eyes, quickly masked by defensiveness. About what? I took a breath. I think we need to take a break. The words felt both terrifying and liberating. A break, he repeated flatly. I need some space. To think. This isn't healthy, Julian. The way I what? His voice was sharp now. The way I care about you? The way I want to make sure you're safe. That's not what this is, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This is control. And I can't. Control. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Are you serious right now? After everything I've done for you? I helped you move in. I've been nothing but supportive of your dreams. You check my phone when I'm in the shower, I interrupted. You get upset when I don't text back within minutes. You comment on what I wear, who I talk to, where I go. That's not support, Julian. That's control. For a moment, he just stared at me, and then his expression shifted into something I'd never seen before, something that made my skin crawl. You're really going to do this? He said quietly. After everything? You know what? I should have known. I should have known you'd turn out to be just like her. Like who? My ex. The one who cheated on me. The one who lied constantly. His voice was rising now. I told you about her. I opened up to you about how she destroyed me. And now you're doing the exact same thing. I'm not cheating on you, I said, my heart pounding. I'm just asking for space. Space, he spat. Right. Because you want to go see Marcus. Or whoever else you've been talking to behind my back. There's no one else. There's never been anyone else. But he wasn't listening anymore. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. You know what? Fine. Leave. But don't come crying back to me when you realize what you gave up. I moved out that weekend. Maya and Bree helped me pack my things while Julian was at work. I texted him that I was coming to get my stuff, and he'd responded with a single word, whatever. Standing in that apartment one last time, looking at the space we'd shared, I felt a complicated mess of emotions. Grief for what I'd thought we had. Relief that it was over. And fear. A gnawing fear about what came next. You okay? Maya asked, touching my arm gently. I nodded, not trusting my voice. You did the right thing, Bree said firmly. That guy was bad news. We were worried about you. Why didn't you say anything? They exchanged a look. We tried, Maya said softly. A few times. But you weren't ready to hear it. And we didn't want to push you away. I understood that. When you're in it, when you love someone, you can't see what everyone else sees. You make excuses. You justify. You convince yourself that love is supposed to be hard, that relationships take work, that no one's perfect. It's only when you step outside of it that you realize how small you'd become. The first week after the breakup was strange. I crashed on Maya's couch, grateful for her patience and her willingness to let me ugly cry into a pint of ice cream at 2 a.m. I blocked Julian on everything, Instagram, Snapchat, his number. I needed a clean break, space to breathe without his text asking me to reconsider or telling me I was making a mistake. My friends rallied around me. Girls' nights, movie marathons, long walks where they let me process everything out loud. Slowly, I started feeling like myself again. Started remembering what it felt like to make decisions without second-guessing them. To wear what I wanted. To go where I wanted. To just exist without permission. It felt like waking up from a long, exhausting dream. But then, 2 weeks after the breakup, I started noticing something weird. Sarah, a mutual friend from our extended circle, had stopped responding to my texts. When I ran into her at the campus coffee shop, she gave me this tight, uncomfortable smile and made an excuse about being late to class. Then there was Owen, a guy from Julian's gym who I'd always gotten along with. We chatted at parties, laughed at the same jokes. But when I waved at him across the quad, he looked right through me. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, that maybe I was still raw from the breakup and reading into things that weren't there. But then I got a message from Emma, a girl I'd only met a handful of times through Julian's friend group. Hey, I don't know if I should tell you this, but I thought you'd want to know. Julian's been saying some stuff about you, about why you guys broke up. I don't know the full story, but just a heads up. People are talking. My stomach dropped. What kind of stuff? I typed back, my hand shaking. That you cheated on him. That you were controlling and manipulative. That he tried to make it work, but you were too unstable. I'm sorry. I just thought you should know. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. He was lying. Julian was actively, deliberately lying about me, rewriting our entire relationship, painting himself as the victim and me as the villain. And people were believing him. Over the next few days, the truth became horrifyingly clear. Screenshots started circulating, texts that Julian had sent to group chats I wasn't in. Messages where he detailed his toxic relationship with me, where he claimed he'd had to walk on eggshells around my jealousy, where he said I'd accused him of cheating when he'd never done anything wrong. It was a complete inversion of reality. Every accusation he made against me was actually something he'd done to me. But he'd gotten there first. He'd controlled the narrative. And because he was charming and convincing and knew exactly how to play the wounded ex-boyfriend, people believed him. I watched my social circle fracture in real time. Friends I'd had for years suddenly became distant. Group chat invitations stopped coming. People I'd trusted looked at me differently, like they were trying to reconcile the person they knew with the monster Julian had described. I felt like I was screaming into a void. I wanted to defend myself, to show people the truth, to expose Julian for what he really was. Maya and Bree encouraged me to speak up, to share my side of the story. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was exhaustion. Or maybe it was the quiet realization that the people who truly knew me wouldn't need convincing. And the people who believed his lies without asking my side, they'd already made their choice. So I stayed silent. I let Julian tell his story. I let him play the victim. I let people think whatever they wanted to think. Because deep down, I knew something he didn't. The truth doesn't need a voice. It just needs time. They say time heals all wounds. What they don't tell you is that time also reveals all truths. The first month after Julian's smear campaign was the loneliest period of my life. I'd wake up every morning with this heavy weight on my chest, dreading the day ahead. Walking across campus felt like navigating a minefield of whispers and sideways glances. I could feel the judgment radiating off people who barely knew me, but had somehow formed complete opinions about my character based on someone else's lies. The worst part wasn't the strangers who believed him. It was watching friendships I'd valued for years crumble, because people chose to believe his version without ever asking for mine. But Maya and Bree never wavered. They became my lifeline, reminding me on the hard days that my worth wasn't determined by Julian's narrative or anyone's perception of it. The truth always comes out, Maya said one night while we sat on her apartment balcony, the city lights twinkling below us. Always. You just have to trust that. I wanted to believe her. But sitting there, feeling like a pariah in my own life, it was hard to have faith in anything. So I made a decision that surprised even myself. I was going to move forward. Not move on, because you don't just move on from having your character assassinated, but move forward, toward something new, toward a version of myself that existed completely separate from Julian and his toxicity. I threw myself into my life with an intensity one hadn't felt in years. I picked up the photography hobby I'd abandoned when Julian complained I spent too much time editing photos. I started going to poetry readings downtown that I'd always wanted to attend, but never did because Julian thought they were pretentious. I reconnected with Marcus, finally getting that coffee we'd planned, and remembered what it felt like to have a friendship that was easy and uncomplicated. I applied for an internship at a digital marketing agency in the city, something I'd been too scared to pursue before, because Julian had convinced me I wasn't ready, that I should wait, that I'd probably fail anyway. I got the position, and slowly, week by week, I started feeling like myself again. Not the girl who'd walked on eggshells, not the girl who'd shrunk herself to fit someone else's expectations, but the girl I'd been before Julian, plus all the strength I'd gained from surviving him. I stopped checking social media obsessively, stopped torturing myself by looking at what people were saying. I deleted Instagram from my phone entirely. If people wanted to believe lies about me, that was their choice. I wasn't going to waste my energy trying to convince them otherwise. But the universe, it turns out, had other plans. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late spring, about 6 months after the breakup, when my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. Hey, you don't know me, but I think we need to talk. My name is Sophia. I'm Julian's girlfriend. My heart stopped. Girlfriend. Julian had moved on. Of course he had. He'd probably been talking to her while we were still together, knowing him. I stared at the message for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the delete button. Part of me wanted nothing to do with this. I'd worked so hard to move forward. Why would I willingly step back into that toxicity? But something made me respond. Okay, what about? Her reply came within seconds. Can we meet? Coffee. I really think you'd want to hear what I have to say. We met at a cafe on the edge of town, far from campus, far from anyone who might know us. Sophia was beautiful in that effortless way some people are. Dark hair, kind eyes, an openness in her expression that made me immediately trust her. She looked tired, though, like she hadn't been sleeping well. Thank you for meeting me, she said as we sat down with our drinks. Her hands were shaking slightly around her cup. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, I admitted. What's this about? She took a deep breath, and I watched her eyes fill with tears. I need to know the truth about what happened between you and Julian, because the story he told me doesn't match up with what I've been experiencing. My chest tightened. What did he tell you? That you were unstable, jealous, that you accused him of things he never did, that you cheated on him and then tried to make him look like the bad guy when he confronted you about it. I felt that familiar sting of anger and hurt, but I kept my voice calm. And you believed him? At first, yes. She looked ashamed. He was so convincing, so vulnerable when he talked about it. He showed me texts where you seemed, I don't know, accusatory, paranoid, and I felt terrible for him. Those texts were responses to him, I said quietly. Context matters. I know that now. She wiped at her eyes. Because he's doing the same things to me that he accused you of doing to him. And then she told me everything. The story was devastatingly familiar. It had started like a fairy tale. He was attentive, romantic, thoughtful. He remembered everything she told him. He made her feel special. But then, slowly, the questions started. Where was she going? Who was she with? Why didn't she text back faster? Then came the comments about her clothes, her friends, her social media presence. Then came the checking of her phone just to see. The accusations disguised as concern, the slow erosion of her independence. I started feeling crazy, Sophia said, her voice breaking. Like I was overreacting to everything. He'd apologize, say he just loved me so much he couldn't help being protective. And I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I felt sick, not just for her, but for every girl who'd come before me and every girl who might come after. What made you reach out to me? I asked. She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. It was a message thread in a group chat, one I recognized. The same friend group Julian had poisoned against me. And there, in his own words, was Julian talking about Sophia. She's great, but honestly kind of clingy. Always asking where I am. Major trust issues. Reminds me of my ex LOL. Why do I keep attracting the crazy ones? The exact same language. The exact same script. I saw this last week, Sophia said. And something clicked. He was using the same words to describe me that he'd used to describe you. So I started digging. She showed me more screenshots. Messages between Julian and other girls, flirtatious, inappropriate, overlapping with both of our relationships. Texts where he badmouthed me using the exact same phrases he was now using about her. But the most damning evidence was what she'd found in his old laptop, a folder of screenshots he'd saved from our relationship. Messages where I'd rightfully called him out for lying, which he'd cropped and shared with friends to make me look unstable. Photos of me he'd kept even after we broke up. Entire conversations he'd twisted to fit his narrative. He's been doing this the entire time, Sophia said, her voice steady now despite the tears. To you, to me, probably to others. He creates this narrative where he's the victim and we're the villains. And people believe him because he's so good at playing wounded. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger anymore. Something colder. Clarity. What are you going to do? I asked. She met my eyes, and I saw determination there. I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. And I need to know if you're okay with me including your story. Sophia didn't just tell people. She posted everything. In a detailed, carefully written statement on her Instagram, she laid out the entire pattern of Julian's behavior. The manipulation, the lies, the gaslighting. She included screenshots, not to be vindictive, but to show proof. She talked about how he'd smeared his ex-me, using the same tactics he was now using on her. She tagged the group chats he'd been bad-mouthing both of us in. She tagged mutual friends. She made it impossible to ignore. And then she did something I never expected. She apologized to me, publicly, to Julian's ex. I'm sorry I believed the lies. I'm sorry I didn't reach out sooner. I'm sorry for every person who judged you based on one side of a story. You deserved better. We all did. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, people started coming forward. Girls who'd dated him in high school with similar stories. Friends who'd witnessed his behavior but stayed quiet. People who'd felt uncomfortable with how he talked about his exes but didn't want to get involved. The group chat that had once mocked me went silent, and then one by one, people started leaving it. I got texts from friends who'd ghosted me. Awkward, rambling apologies. I should have asked your side. I'm sorry I believed him. I feel terrible. Part of me wanted to be petty, to say I told you so or refuse their apologies. But mostly I just felt tired and relieved and vindicated in a way that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with truth. Sarah, the girl who'd avoided me on campus, sent me a long message explaining she felt pressured by Julian to take a side. Owen, who'd looked right through me, admitted he'd known Julian was lying but didn't want the drama. Even Emma, who'd warned me months ago, reached out. I'm glad the truth came out. You handled this with so much grace. Julian tried to control the narrative one last time. He posted his own statement, claiming Sophia was lying, that she'd manipulated his words, that I'd put her up to this. He painted himself as the victim of two vindictive exes conspiring against him. But this time, no one was buying it. The screenshots spoke for themselves. The pattern was too clear. The similarities too obvious. People saw him for what he really was, a manipulator who'd gotten away with it for years because he was charming enough to make people doubt his victims. Within a week, he deleted all his social media. I never responded publicly. I didn't need to. Sophia had done what I wouldn't do for myself. She'd spoken the truth loudly enough that it couldn't be ignored. And in doing so, she'd freed both of us from the prison of his lies. We met for coffee again a few weeks later. This time, it wasn't heavy or painful. We talked about our lives, our dreams, our plans for the future. We laughed about how we'd both dodged a bullet. Thank you, I told her as we were leaving, for having the courage I didn't have. She shook her head. You had courage. You just chose to use it differently. You chose your peace over proving yourself. That's not weakness. That's strength. The truth is, I didn't destroy Julian. He destroyed himself. All I did was survive him. All I did was choose to keep living, keep growing, keep becoming the person I was always meant to be. And eventually, his lies collapsed under their own weight, because lies always do. I learned that revenge isn't something you plan. It's not something you execute. Real revenge is becoming so whole, so healed, so completely yourself that the person who tried to break you becomes irrelevant. It's letting time expose what words never could. It's trusting that your truth doesn't need defending, because truth is patient. And sometimes, the universe delivers justice in ways you never could have orchestrated yourself. Today, I'm in a new city. I have a job I love. I'm surrounded by people who know me, really know me, and love me anyway. I post whatever I want on social media. I wear what makes me happy. I go where I please. And I never think about Julian anymore. Well, almost never. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that girl who stayed silent while lies swirled around her. The girl who chose dignity over defense. And I'm proud of her. Because she knew something the rest of us forget sometimes. Your reputation is built by how you live, not by what others say about you. And the people worth keeping in your life, they'll wait for the truth. If you're going through something like this right now, if someone is spreading lies about you, if your character is being assassinated, if you feel alone in knowing the truth, I want you to hear this. Hold on. Your truth doesn't need defending. It just needs time. The right people will see through the lies. The wrong people will reveal themselves. And one day, you'll look back and realize that surviving with your integrity intact was the greatest revenge you could have ever had. Trust the process. Trust yourself. And trust that karma doesn't need your help. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to The Last Lesson. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story about heartbreak, healing, and finding your strength. Drop a comment below if you've ever been through something similar. Your story matters and you're not alone. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself